America is drowning in debt, and it's rising faster than ever. The national tab has surged past $35 trillion, ballooning by nearly $1 trillion every 100 days. That means each taxpayer now effectively owes more than $15,000 toward the country's growing bill. While Washington keeps printing money and Wall Street keeps gambling, millions of everyday Americans are barely staying afloat, living paycheck to paycheck and one unexpected expense away from financial ruin. Across the country, cracks are already spreading. Entire states are struggling under the weight of failing pension systems, bankrupt hospitals, collapsing public schools, and shrinking populations. And when the next recession inevitably hits, these places won't just stumble, they could implode. In today's video, we're revealing the 10 U.S. states most at risk of total economic collapse when America's towering financial house of cards finally comes crashing down. Number 10. West Virginia. If you want a chilling glimpse of what long-term economic collapse looks like in slow motion, look no further than West Virginia. Once the proud engine of America's coal industry, the state has watched its economic foundation crumble. Since 2010, coal production in West Virginia has plummeted by over 75%, wiping out tens of thousands of high-paying, union-backed jobs that once sustained entire communities. And with no strong industry rising to take coal's place, the state has drifted into economic stagnation, propped up by low-wage service jobs and federal aid just to keep the lights on. The numbers paint a bleak picture. Nearly 1 in 5 residents lives below the poverty line, far above the national average of 12%. The median household income barely breaks $55,000, a full $15,000 less than the U.S. median. And it's not just about income, it's about participation. Only 54% of working-age adults are in the labor force. That means nearly half the state's potential workforce isn't just unemployed, they've given up altogether. This isn't a jobs crisis, it's an economic surrender. Layered on top is a devastating opioid epidemic that's hit West Virginia harder than anywhere else in the country. Some counties are now seeing over 80 overdose deaths per 100,000 people, the highest in the nation. The toll on human lives is staggering. But it's also an economic black hole, draining billions in healthcare costs and eroding the state's already fragile workforce. And the population? It's disappearing. Since 2010, West Virginia has lost more than 100,000 residents, a 6% decline in just over a decade. Young people grow up, graduate, and then leave as fast as they can, heading to places like North Carolina, Ohio, or Texas in search of opportunity. What's left behind is one of the oldest populations in the country. Nearly 21% of West Virginians are over 65. That creates enormous strain on healthcare systems and pension obligations, all while the tax base keeps shrinking. Even the infrastructure is falling apart. The state faces a massive backlog of overdue maintenance, from roads to water systems. In some counties, 1 in every 5 bridges is considered structurally deficient, and there's no money to fix it. West Virginia's financial cushion is razor thin. More than 35% of the state's entire budget now depends on federal funding. That means if Washington cuts back or a recession guts tax revenues, there's no safety net left. The truth? West Virginia isn't bracing for collapse. It's already living through one. The only question now is how much further it falls when the next economic shock hits. Number 9. Mississippi. Mississippi has the grim distinction of ranking dead last across nearly every major economic metric in the country. And in 2025, it's not just underperforming, it's barely hanging on. The median household income in Mississippi sits at just $48,000, trailing a staggering $22,000 behind the national average. For millions of families, that means living paycheck to paycheck, or worse, not making ends meet at all. Poverty is deeply rooted here. Roughly 1 in 5 residents lives below the poverty line. And in some of the state's most rural counties, that figure skyrockets past 35%, creating regions locked in generational economic hardship with no clear way out. The labor market reflects that same bleak reality. Only 56% of working-age adults in Mississippi are employed or actively looking for work, the lowest participation rate in the entire nation. That's not just unemployment, it's disconnection. Tens of thousands of people have stopped trying altogether, a sign of deep and widespread economic despair. And the state's struggling education system isn't helping. Mississippi routinely lands at 50th in national test scores. Chronic underfunding and limited access to higher education mean that many of the state's brightest students leave and never come back. Then there's healthcare, or the lack of it. Mississippi has the highest infant mortality rate in the U.S. and one of the lowest average life expectancies, with residents living about 5 years less than the national average. Rural hospitals are shutting down at an alarming pace, leaving entire communities more than an hour away from the nearest ER. And with 14% of the population uninsured, one medical emergency can wipe out a family's finances completely. Infrastructure is another pressure point, and it's buckling. Nearly a quarter of Mississippi's bridges are considered structurally deficient, and the state faces billions in overdue repairs to its crumbling roads and water systems. The water crisis in Jackson made national headlines, but it's far from an isolated issue. It's just the most visible symptom of a much larger breakdown. And financially, the state's budget is dangerously thin. Mississippi relies on federal funding for over 40% of its expenditures. If Washington pulls back or a national recession dries up those funds, there's no safety net waiting to catch the fall. Mississippi isn't just at risk of economic hardship. It's teetering on the edge of systemic collapse. The combined weight of poverty, poor health, underperforming schools, and a shrinking workforce makes the state frighteningly vulnerable. When the next downturn hits, Mississippi won't just struggle to recover. It may spiral into something far worse: a failure of basic services and a breakdown of public systems that no quick fix can reverse. Number 8. Michigan. Michigan is often praised as a comeback kid, a Rust Belt survivor that bounced back after the 2008 meltdown. But behind the headlines and hip downtown revivals in cities like Detroit and Ann Arbor, the cracks are widening again, and fast. While the auto industry has clawed its way back to life, it remains Michigan's lifeline, and that's exactly the problem. As of 2024, nearly 1/5 of the state's economy still hinges on manufacturing, especially auto production. That kind of dependence is risky business in a world of unpredictable supply chains and global market swings. One bad quarter in car sales, and Michigan starts to wobble. Household finances aren't faring much better. Michigan ranks near the top when it comes to financial strain, with over 40% of residents reporting overdue bills, medical debt, or loan defaults. And the median household income? Just $63,000, well below the national average. In places like Detroit, the numbers get even worse. Entire neighborhoods are still grappling with poverty rates over 30%, nearly 2 decades after the last crash. Then there's the slow-motion exodus. From 2020 to 2024, Michigan lost more than 100,000 residents, families packing up and heading south or west in search of better opportunities and warmer economies. That mass migration is draining local tax bases and leaving behind shrinking towns and aging, low-income populations that rely heavily on already overstretched public programs. In Detroit alone, about 21% of homes are vacant, casting long shadows over entire neighborhoods. Blighted properties drag down surrounding values, invite crime, and create a feedback loop of decline. And let's talk about the roads, or what's left of them. Michigan's infrastructure is in brutal shape. Roughly 45% of its roads are rated poor, and fixing them would take over $7 billion just to catch up. And water? Flint may have been the wake-up call, but lead contamination and failing sewer systems still threaten public health in several counties, especially during heavy storms. Healthcare access is another ticking time bomb. The opioid crisis is still surging, with overdose deaths doubling over the past 10 years. Rural hospitals are shutting their doors, leaving many communities with little to no access to emergency care. Here's the brutal truth. When the auto sector falters, Michigan doesn't just slow down, it crashes. A single hiccup in global demand could spark another wave of layoffs, foreclosures, and economic panic, eerily reminiscent of 2008, when Michigan topped the charts for home repossessions. Without serious economic diversification, Michigan's so-called recovery is built on a house of cards. The rust isn't gone, it's just wearing a fresh coat of paint. And if history is any guide, it won't take much to watch that shine fade all over again. Number 7. Alabama. Alabama may be rich in Southern heritage, college football pride, and natural charm, but beneath all that tradition, the state's economic base is quietly crumbling. Let's start with the numbers. The median household income in Alabama is just around $59,000, placing it firmly in the bottom tier nationwide. And with nearly 1 in 6 residents living in poverty, that's not just a statistic. It's daily life for close to 800,000 Alabamians who are barely getting by. Now, zoom in on education, the engine of long-term economic growth, and it's clear why Alabama's future feels uncertain. Public schools across the state consistently rank near the bottom nationally, thanks to years of underfunding, persistent teacher shortages, and lagging graduation rates. Only 27% of Alabama adults hold a college degree, compared to the national average of 36%. That growing education gap is pushing ambitious young people out, and they're not looking back. States like Georgia and Texas are reaping the benefits of Alabama's brain drain. Healthcare? It's another pressure point. Alabama chose not to expand Medicaid, leaving nearly 300,000 residents stuck without affordable insurance. The fallout has been devastating. Since 2010, the state has lost over 15 rural hospitals, creating vast medical deserts where residents are forced to drive hours for emergency care. Alabama also has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the U.S., and average life expectancy trails the national figure by about 3 years. And then there's the infrastructure, and it's showing serious wear and tear. Engineers gave Alabama's roads and bridges a D+, with more than 16% of bridges considered structurally deficient. Meanwhile, internet access in rural areas remains inconsistent at best, cutting off communities from modern job markets and economic development. The state's budget situation doesn't offer much comfort either. Alabama has one of the smallest rainy day reserves in the country. If another economic downturn hits, there's almost no cushion to soften the blow. And because the state relies heavily on volatile industries like aerospace, auto manufacturing, and agriculture, even small global disruptions can have outsized consequences here. The next recession won't just tighten belts. It could bring systems crashing down. Schools may close early, hospitals might turn patients away, and basic services could break under the weight of rising need and falling revenue. Alabama's structural problems have been quietly growing for years. When the economy stumbles again, they may explode into full-blown crisis. Number 6. Arkansas. Arkansas doesn't usually dominate the national conversation like New York or California, but don't let that fool you. Its problems are just as serious, only they unfold more quietly, under the radar. Let's talk money. The average household in Arkansas earns around $53,000 a year, placing the state near the very bottom of national income rankings. Meanwhile, roughly 15% of the population lives in poverty, and in many rural areas, that figure climbs even higher. Entire communities are feeling the squeeze, with job prospects drying up, healthcare drifting further out of reach, and small businesses shutting down one by one. The healthcare situation is especially bleak. Arkansas has one of the highest rates of uninsured residents in the country, with more than 200,000 people going without coverage. In remote counties, people often have to travel over 50 miles just to see a doctor, and the closures of 10 rural hospitals since 2010 have only made things worse. When emergencies hit, help can be dangerously far away. No surprise that medical debt continues to be a top cause of personal bankruptcy across the state. Education isn't faring much better. Less than 25% of adults in Arkansas hold a bachelor's degree, severely limiting the state's ability to build a modern, adaptable workforce. In rural districts, schools struggle with outdated buildings, aging equipment, and budget shortfalls. And with an ongoing teacher shortage, improving student outcomes becomes even more difficult. Without a strong educational foundation, Arkansas remains a tough sell for tech companies or industries looking to innovate and grow. Then there's the issue of economic concentration. Walmart, headquartered in Bentonville, is by far the state's biggest private employer. But even that giant is tightening its belt, cutting costs, and replacing human workers with automation. Meanwhile, the agriculture and manufacturing sectors, long seen as the economic backbone of Arkansas, are becoming more unstable. Shrinking profits, offshoring, and global market shifts are making those industries harder to rely on. Infrastructure is falling behind, too. Nearly 40% of rural Arkansans still lack access to reliable high-speed internet. In today's digital economy, that's not just inconvenient, it's a deal breaker for progress. On top of that, roads and bridges across the state are crumbling, but there's little money to fix them. Arkansas operates with one of the leanest budgets in the country, and nearly 45% of its revenue comes from federal funds, meaning if Washington ever tightens the purse strings, Arkansas is left dangerously exposed. Unlike some states that go out with a bang, say, a housing collapse or a market crash, Arkansas is facing a slow, painful unraveling. Families are moving away, healthcare options are disappearing, job growth is stalling, and younger generations see no reason to return. It's a quiet crisis. But when the next economic storm hits, that silence could quickly give way to something far more alarming, a realization that Arkansas's economy is far more fragile than it seems. Number 5. Kentucky. Kentucky is a sobering example of what happens when a dominant industry fades away and nothing steps in to fill the void. Once powered by coal, the state's economic foundation has steadily crumbled as coal employment has plummeted by more than 60% since 2010. In many parts of eastern Kentucky, especially in the Appalachian foothills, unemployment still runs several percentage points above the national average. The fallout? Generational poverty that's become deeply rooted, with no easy path out. Take a look at the numbers. The median household income in Kentucky hovers around $57,000, placing it near the bottom nationally, 47th out of 50 states. Almost 17% of Kentuckians live in poverty, and in some of the most rural mountain counties, that number spikes above 25%. Many families are scraping by on government assistance, relying heavily on food stamps, disability payments, or both, just to survive. Participation in the workforce is also alarmingly low. Only about 58% of working-age adults are employed or even actively looking for work, far short of the national norm. It's not just unemployment, it's a widespread withdrawal from the economy. Healthcare is yet another serious concern. Since 2010, Kentucky has seen 12 rural hospitals close, cutting off critical access to emergency care for people in remote regions. In some mountain communities, the nearest hospital is now over an hour away. Life expectancy in the state lags the national average by 4 years, and the opioid crisis has been especially devastating. With more than 2,100 overdose deaths every year, Kentucky ranks among the hardest-hit states, draining both families and state resources alike. Education, often seen as a ladder out of poverty, isn't delivering much hope either. Just 27% of adults in the state hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and in rural districts, underfunded schools with aging buildings and low graduation rates are the norm. As a result, young people leave the state in droves, searching for opportunity elsewhere and leaving behind an older, shrinking population with fewer resources and even fewer options. Economically, Kentucky remains stuck. The state is still heavily reliant on fading sectors like coal and tobacco, while struggling to attract modern industries or high-tech investment. Meanwhile, infrastructure problems continue to mount. About 1 in every 10 bridges across the state is considered structurally deficient, and broadband access in rural areas remains unreliable, choking off any chance for digital-driven economic growth. If another recession hits, and history tells us it's not a matter of if, but when, Kentucky won't just face higher job losses. It may experience something far worse, entire regions being economically abandoned. In parts of the state, especially in the isolated mountain towns, it already feels like that's happening. Kentucky isn't preparing for collapse. In many places, it's already one bad year away from it. Number 4. Nevada. Nevada may sparkle on the surface, with the nonstop buzz of Las Vegas lights and the promise of big winnings. But behind the curtain, the state's economy is built on a shaky foundation. At its core, nearly a third of Nevada's workforce is tied directly to tourism, hospitality, and gaming, industries that soar in boom times and nosedive the moment people stop spending. And when the crowds stop coming, Nevada doesn't just slow down, it hits a wall. The state's unemployment data tells the story clearly. It's one of the most volatile labor markets in the country, with jobless rates swinging from 3.6% to over 4.2% within a single year. During the 2008 financial crisis, Nevada had the highest unemployment in the nation, topping 13%. Many of the jobs lost back, then never came back. Real estate in Nevada is just as unstable. Back in the 2008 crash, the state became a cautionary tale, posting the second highest foreclosure rate in the country. Since then, home values have rebounded with force, especially after 2020, rising over 40% in just a few years. But that rapid rise came at a cost. Affordability has been wiped out. In Las Vegas today, the median home price exceeds $450,000, while household incomes average around $72,000. That math doesn't work for most families, and it's left many living one missed paycheck away from crisis. If the economy slips again, a fresh wave of foreclosures is more than possible. It's likely. And it's not just the big cities that are hurting. In rural parts of the state, populations are shrinking, and the local economies are often built on low-wage service jobs with few alternatives. Healthcare access is limited, and public services are stretched thin. Infrastructure across Nevada is showing serious signs of wear. Roughly 1 in 5 bridges is considered structurally deficient, and the state faces a growing threat from water scarcity. The Colorado River system, which supplies much of Nevada's water, has hit historic lows, and that's not just a problem, it's a potential crisis. Then there's the budget. Nevada is one of the few states with no income tax, which sounds great, until you realize it relies heavily on sales taxes, tourism dollars, and gaming revenue to fund essential services. These revenue streams plunge during downturns. Case in point, during the pandemic, visitor numbers dropped 30%, and the state's budget took a beating, forcing deep cuts to public programs. At the end of the day, Nevada's economy is a lot like the casinos it's known for, dazzling and exciting when luck's on your side, but terrifying when the streak ends. And as we edge closer to another economic slowdown, Nevada isn't just at risk, it's on the brink. When the chips fall, the state may find itself staring down yet another collapse, built on the same fragile foundation of tourism and chance. Number 3. Louisiana. Louisiana is a state under pressure, battling on every front, from economic instability to natural disasters, and the statistics paint a sobering picture. Nearly 1 in 5 residents lives in poverty, translating to close to 900,000 people struggling to get by, one of the highest poverty rates in the country. The average household brings in about $56,000 a year, placing Louisiana near the bottom of the national income rankings. At the heart of the issue is economic dependence on oil and gas. These industries dominate the state's economy, but they're also highly unpredictable. When global oil prices fall, or when energy policy shifts toward renewables, Louisiana feels the sting almost immediately. The state is caught in a boom and bust cycle it hasn't managed to escape, and diversification efforts have been sluggish at best. The results are plain to see. Abandoned refineries, shuttered factories, and small towns slowly fading away, all symptoms of a system that's no longer sustainable. And if that weren't enough, Louisiana faces some of the nation's most devastating natural disasters. Hurricane Ida alone inflicted more than $75 billion in damages in 2021, destroying homes, businesses, and infrastructure. But the real danger is that storms like Ida aren't once in a generation anymore. They're becoming routine. With no significant financial cushion, each hurricane season threatens to wipe out years of recovery efforts. Infrastructure in Louisiana is hanging by a thread. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the state a D+, with more than 1,500 bridges rated structurally deficient. Roads are deteriorating. Levees are aging. Water systems are outdated. And worst of all, the coastline is literally disappearing, with Louisiana losing about a football field of land every 100 minutes to erosion. This environmental threat isn't just symbolic. It's swallowing neighborhoods and putting entire communities at risk. Add to that a severe brain drain problem. Over 70% of LSU graduates leave the state within 5 years, taking their talent, income, and future potential with them. Rural parishes are losing population steadily, and even larger cities like New Orleans and Baton Rouge are seeing slow growth at best. Healthcare, also in crisis. Many parts of Louisiana, especially outside the cities, lack access to reliable medical care. High uninsured rates and underfunded hospitals mean thousands are left vulnerable, both financially and physically, in times of need. When you put it all together, Louisiana's challenges aren't just economic, they're existential. A weak tax base, failing infrastructure, dependence on a volatile industry, and relentless natural disasters combine into a perfect storm. One that's pushing the state closer to collapse, not hypothetically, but in real time. The ground is literally sinking beneath Louisiana's feet, and without a massive shift in priorities and investment, the state could be heading toward a breaking point that's hard to come back from. Number 2. Hawaii. From a distance, Hawaii looks like heaven on earth. Picture perfect beaches, crystal clear waters, swaying palms, and world-class resorts. But for the people who actually live there, the story is far less idyllic. The harsh reality is that Hawaii has become economically unbearable for everyday residents. The median home price has soared beyond $850,000, while the average household income is stuck around $88,000. That massive gap means a typical family would have to save every dime for nearly 10 years just to scrape together a down payment. For most locals, the dream of owning a home has completely slipped out of reach. But the housing crunch is just the beginning. Hawaii holds the unfortunate title of having the highest cost of living in the nation. Groceries, gas, and everyday items come with extreme markups because nearly everything must be shipped thousands of miles to the islands. It's not unusual for a gallon of milk to cost over $6, or for gas prices to regularly hover above $5 per gallon. Add in utilities and rent, and families already living paycheck to paycheck are drowning under basic expenses. The state's economy also leans heavily, almost dangerously, on tourism, which makes up about 30% of Hawaii's total GDP. When the pandemic struck, visitor numbers plummeted more than 70%, devastating local businesses and wiping out thousands of jobs. Even by 2024, the recovery remained incomplete, with arrivals still down 15% from pre-COVID levels. That's a serious warning sign. If another global crisis, whether economic, environmental, or political, disrupts tourism again, Hawaii's financial lifeline could be severed in an instant. Meanwhile, many longtime residents are being priced out of their own homeland. Native Hawaiians are leaving in droves, forced to relocate due to rising home prices, short-term rental conversions, and wealthy outsiders buying up real estate as vacation homes or investment properties. Between 2010 and 2024, Hawaii lost tens of thousands of permanent residents, while gaining more part-time populations, retirees, foreign buyers, and digital nomads who can afford inflated costs but don't contribute to local stability. Healthcare and infrastructure are both under significant strain. Doctor shortages are especially severe on the outer islands, where some communities lack reliable access to medical care. And because Hawaii is so heavily dependent on imports, any disruption in global supply chains, whether it's a shipping delay or a fuel shortage, translates directly into empty shelves and price hikes. The energy situation is equally precarious. Hawaii pays some of the highest electricity rates in the country and imports nearly 80% of its food, making it dangerously exposed to external shocks. At this point, Hawaii feels more like a luxury retreat for the rich than a livable state for the working class. It may still look like paradise in travel brochures, but for those trying to make a life there, it's a financial nightmare. And when the next major economic downturn hits, Hawaii may be one of the first to buckle, revealing just how fragile island living can be when the beauty fades and reality takes over. Number 1. Illinois. Illinois may be home to the glittering skyline of Chicago, prestigious universities, and a legacy of industrial might. But behind the impressive facade lies one of the most dangerous fiscal crises in the country. At the heart of it all is a looming disaster, the pension time bomb. The state's public retirement systems are buried under an unfunded liability of $139 billion, a number so massive it breaks down to nearly $11,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state. No other state comes close. Year after year, this debt snowballs, swallowing up more and more of the state's budget. It's not a distant concern. It's a crisis unfolding in real time. Credit rating agencies have taken note. Illinois holds the dubious distinction of having the lowest credit rating in the nation, teetering just above junk bond status. That means when the state borrows money, it pays higher interest rates than almost anywhere else, making everything from building infrastructure to funding public services even more expensive. And every time the economy slows down, Illinois digs itself deeper. To stay afloat, the state borrows more, which increases debt payments and leaves essential services like education and healthcare gasping for funding. Then come the taxes. Illinois residents pay some of the highest property taxes in America, roughly 2.2% of a home's value every year. For a middle-class family living in a $300,000 house, that's about $6,600 annually, just in property tax alone. That kind of financial pressure is pushing families out of the state in large numbers. In 2024 alone, over 83,000 people packed up and left Illinois, one of the steepest population losses in the nation. And it's not just any residents leaving. It's high earners and working professionals. When they go, they take their tax dollars with them, shrinking the revenue base and accelerating the financial freefall. While downtown Chicago may be booming, the rest of the state paints a different picture. Manufacturing jobs have dried up, small towns are shrinking, and many public school districts are grossly underfunded. Outside of major urban centers, the economic picture is bleak. Illinois' median household income is around $75,000, which sounds decent on paper. But when you factor in sky-high taxes, rising costs of living, and stagnant wage growth, it doesn't stretch nearly as far as it should, especially for the middle class. Infrastructure is another major red flag. The state has nearly 2,400 structurally deficient bridges, and deferred maintenance on roads, water systems, and public buildings gets worse every year. Why? Because so much of the state's budget is being eaten alive by pensions and interest payments. Social safety nets are fraying at the seams. Wait times for basic services are growing longer, and underfunded programs are being stretched beyond capacity. Healthcare, education, and housing assistance are all suffering as resources are drained away. This isn't a slow decline, it's a rapid unraveling. The next economic downturn won't just put Illinois under pressure. It could push the state to the edge. Tax revenues will plunge, but pension payouts are locked in, which means the only options left will be painful. Deeper cuts to vital services, even higher taxes, and an even faster population exodus. The truth is, the pension bomb isn't waiting to go off, it's already sparking. Illinois may still shine in parts, but financially, it's standing at the edge of collapse.